We finally have our bracket filled out for the college football playoff, which will begin a week from Friday with Indiana taking on Notre Dame. That's a standalone game. And then the following Saturday, December the 21st, we'll get 3 games in the very first 12-team college football playoff. We asked our Danny Kanell to fill out that bracket. And away we go, Danny, with 4 first-round games, all of them touchdown spreads or more. And you're going to give us multiple upsets here, including the biggest upset. The biggest spread is Texas, favored by double digits against Clemson.
People are sleeping on Clemson, Chris. I can just picture Dabo Swinney after a win at the podium saying, nobody gave us a chance. They wrote us off at the beginning of the season, and yet here we are. Does anybody realize Cade Klubnik is 3rd in the country in touchdown passes this season, only behind Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward? He has really come a long way since that second half against Georgia. Texas has really been solid. I think they're a really good football team, but there's just something about this one. The last time Cade Klubnik was in this stadium, he was playing against the opposing quarterback in Quinn Ewers and got the best of him in a high school state football game. I think you could see a repeat scenario. Bryant Wesco, by the way, has really arrived for them as well. Clemson's defense provides some problems, but I'm going to go with the upset here and take Clemson.
Wow, okay, and there's one more upset coming. Let's get to Tennessee, Ohio State next, and some suggesting that if things start to go bad early, it could get really ugly inside the horseshoe because they're coming off that loss to Michigan.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. But I don't think it does, Chris. I feel like Ohio State, they've been given a new lease on life and an opportunity to put that game behind them. And maybe it's just a Michigan hex, right? There's some voodoo there. They've got demons that, because that rivalry means so much. There's also a rivalry Big Ten SEC, but Ohio State has had some success against these SEC programs, and that was at neutral sites. We saw them go toe-to-toe with Georgia not that long ago, a field goal late. Missed that one, or else Ryan Day might have a national championship. I think they handle Tennessee's pass rush, and they control that young quarterback in Nico. I think Ohio State gets it done at home at the Shoe.
All right, another Big Ten team hosting a first-round game. It's going to be a whiteout during the day at Happy Valley, noon Eastern time on that Saturday. It's Penn State hosting SMU.
So this one, I really liked SMU. I thought about them because, they're not all going to be chalk, right? So I was looking at upsets. I think there's really good value. SMU against the spread. I could even see a potential scenario like we saw in the ACC championship game where it looked like they were going to get dominated early and then Kevin Jennings brings them back. But I also just watched Penn State with 2 100-yard rushers against Oregon in the Big Ten championship game, and I saw Drew Aller step up and make some big plays. If he eliminates the turnovers, which I do think he will, I think this is Penn State. I think their defense contains enough of Kevin Jennings and that SMU offense to get the best of them. Also, team from Texas traveling into the cold weather, a little bit too much to handle, so I'll go Penn State. But I do like the spread there. I do like SMU to cover. Penn State wins.
All right, so every team playing on that Saturday, a week from Saturday, those 3 games that we just picked, they all have at least 2 losses. There's only 2 teams that only have 1 loss playing round 1, and they're playing each other in their home state. It's Indiana at Notre Dame, Danny.
I like both these programs. I love the aspect because you definitely have a big brother, little brother dynamic with one of the biggest brands of college football going with this Indiana team who's brand new to the stage. But Kirk Cignetti has brought a confidence that's been unwavering in this team. And I'll go back and remind people because I've heard some people say, oh, this team got boat raced by Ohio State. Do we realize their defense held Ohio State to their lowest production of the season and that 14 of those points were gifted in the special teams? I think Indiana pulls off the upset here at Notre Dame. Notre Dame has been really good, but I don't think they've been tested even as much as Indiana was late this season. And all of a sudden, their win against Michigan, to me, looks better because Michigan, what they did to Ohio State, that's a physical team. They've already got tested on the road. I think they're equipped to do it in South Bend. So I'll roll with Indiana here as another upset in this round.
Okay, first round games on campus. Into the quarterfinals we go in Danny Kanell's bracket. These are all quote-unquote bowl games now. And by the way, the favorite to win the championship according to Sportsline is already out of Danny's bracket. That would be the Texas Longhorns. Sportsline giving them a 25% chance to win the whole thing. I think a lot of that has to do with the potential draw, the path because Clemson moves on. They get to face Arizona State. We'll see how it works out. That's in the Peach Bowl. Danny Kanell is going to bring us through these matchups as well. And let's start with that one in the Peach Bowl. Look, Pete Prisco says he's going to go to this game and cheer on Arizona State. I don't think he's seen them play in like 70 years. So what do you think, Clemson and ASU and Scattaboo, one of the most fun running backs we've ever seen in college football?
He's awesome. I mean, there's been a few players which could easily be, MVPs of their team, and without them, they'd probably be 7-5. And I would put Cam Scattaboo in that category. Up there as one of the top backs. We saw them without Jordan Tyson, their best receiver, still find offense. Sam Levitt played really well. But I'm going to go with Clemson here. They've got, again, I think they're playing with a ton of confidence. I think their defense will be one of the more physical defenses that Arizona State has played against. I also think Clemson would be favored here. Small favor, but I think the experience of being in these types of games, these types of matchup favors Dabo Swinney and that veteran-laden team. So I'll say the Kenning Dillingham story, which has been awesome, I think it comes to an end against Clemson. I got Clemson moving on.
All right, let's move on to, you would have a rematch in one of the best games we saw all season. It was Ohio State going to Oregon, losing by 1 point at the Horn. They would be matching up in the Rose Bowl here, Danny.
Yeah, this game would be epic. It would be incredible. And people say it's really hard to beat a team twice. Not if you're the most complete team in all of college football, which I do think Oregon is. As much as we've talked about Ohio State or Penn State's performance against Oregon, that game was never really in doubt. Oregon had the lead from start to finish, and yes, Penn State made it close, cut it to 8 points. But I was so impressed with watching Dylan Gabriel, 4 touchdowns, 0 interception, execute that system. Ohio State, I don't think they have what it takes to get through. Will Howard, this game would be massive for him on the bigger stages in games like this, especially against Michigan. Those 2 picks were quite costly. I think you see Oregon get it done and move on.
These quarterfinal games, 3 of them anyway, taking place on New Year's Day, 1 of them on New Year's Eve, and that's the Fiesta Bowl. Penn State, a team that many believe has an easier path to the championship than Oregon because they get SMU first. You have them beating them, and then they would be a favorite here against Boise.
Yeah, and I saw Spencer Danielson. He was reacting to everyone saying that Penn State's path is so easy now, and he's going to take exception to that. I don't think it's going to be easy, but I do think Penn State will be able to contain Ashton Jeanty enough. We saw what they did against Oregon's running backs. They really did a masterful job, and I don't think that Boise State has the weapons on the outside if they can make them one-dimensional. And I know what they did to Oregon earlier this season, but I do think Penn State will be up to the challenge. I think Drew Aller really kind of made those big plays. He had the 1 interception that wasn't a pick 6, but they took it back to the 1 in the Big Ten championship game. He's got enough mobility to get after it, and this is where I think they can lean on Boise State's defense and put up the points they need to. So I'll say Penn State advances.
One more quarterfinal game to pick. It's the Sugar Bowl, Indiana against Georgia. Who do you like?
So I thought, I was kind of looking for a Cinderella story like we see in the college basketball bracket where you see a team make a deep run. Was tempted to make it Indiana. I just think Georgia's defense will be too overwhelming for Curtis Warwick and company. I think it would be a similar game like you saw against Ohio State where Indiana's offense couldn't do anything. But I do think Indiana's defense would keep them in this game. I think it would be a lower scoring affair. And without Carson Beck, which it does appear, I don't think there's that much drop-off or change to the offense. Carson Beck has, 3 games where he had 3 interceptions. It almost feels like, they were only going to go as far as he took them. Well, now without him, I feel like Gunnar Stockton's the guy. He showed some legs, showed enough capability where he can operate that offense, but it'll be about Georgia's defense. So I'll say Georgia advances.
Okay, that would be the only SEC team advancing into Danny Kanell's semifinals with a couple of Big Ten teams. And the Cinderella, I guess, the Clemson Tigers, even though they are a multiple-time national champion under Dabo Swinney, they would take on Oregon, while Penn State would take on Georgia in the other semi. Let's start with Oregon against Clemson, Danny, and it sounds like you are higher on Oregon than anybody else at this point.
Yeah, I am. I mean, Tez Johnson, we saw Kenny Sadiq, the weapons they have on the outside, they've got physicality, so they weren't able to run the football very much against Penn State's defense. And Penn State had 2 100 rushers against them. But Clemson has been struggling to run the ball as well. They couldn't run it against SMU. I don't think they'll be able to run it against Oregon. I think this could be a higher scoring affair. but I'm going to go with the more experienced quarterback. He's going to go down as one of the, his career being the most prolific in college football history. And I know he's played more games than anybody else now because he's been in college, but feels like 17 years. But Dan Lanning gets the most of Dabo Swinney. I think this is where the Cinderella story comes to an end. And mostly it's about Oregon just being the most complete team that's out there.
Okay, so Oregon moving on there. The other semi, you have Penn State against Georgia. And at this point, how are you handicapping the quarterback situation at Georgia with Carson Beck really being a question mark with the injury he sustained over the weekend?
I told James, our producer, because I emailed this before that news came out. I said, if Carson Beck is out, let me maybe switch this pick, but I'm not going to. I still think Georgia has enough weapons around a young quarterback in Gunnar Stockton and an offensive line that has gotten better since they got back Tate Ratledge. And we saw Trevor Etienne, carry that team with a couple touchdowns on the ground there in the SEC championship game. If this Georgia team for a full half can do what they did to Texas, I think they can do the same thing to Penn State. I think it'll be a great game, a clash between the Big Ten and the SEC. But I'll say Georgia advances to the championship game.
And if it plays out this way, Georgia is right back to their home state in Atlanta, where we saw them win the SEC championship, where we've seen them win many a major game over the years, whether it be in the postseason or the start of the season. You've got number 2 Georgia against number 1 Oregon in the national championship. How does it play out?
And I know Kirby Smart was crying about going on the road, quote, all season long. But this would be, if they play this game, Chris, it'll be their 9th game this season in the state of Georgia. Wow. That's right. So you can tell me all you want about going on the road, but it's nice to play neutral site games in your backyard like the SEC championship game. And if they get to this one, but you know what I just witnessed? I was in Indianapolis, and it was pretty much a home game for Penn State. That was pretty much a whiteout. It did not impair the Oregon Ducks. The leadership they've got on the offensive side of the ball, watch out for that defense with Jordan Birch and Mateo Uyunglele. I think they're the difference in this one. Oregon's defense, I don't think they would be as prolific through the air without Carson Beck. I think this is where Georgia would get exposed somewhat, and Dan Lanning would get the most of his former boss and Kirby Smart, which would firmly cement Dan Lanning as a top 3 coach in college football. I think it happens. I think it's been, this way from the beginning. Most complete team out there. The Oregon Ducks are 2024 national champs.
All right, Danny Kanell, part of the Cover 3 podcast. Those guys working overtime over the weekend out there in Indianapolis, putting together some great shows, and then instant reaction to the CFP bracket. And thank you, Danny. Really appreciate that. Much more to come from the Cover 3 as we ramp up to the playoff, which is only a week and a half away.